students, welcome to Boundless Maths. In today's video, we are going to cover the respiration life process as part of the life process chapter of class 10 CBSE science syllabus. So in the previous video, we talked about nutrition. If you have not watched the video, please go back and watch the video on nutrition to understand the entire process of nutrition and then continue with respiration. So let's get started. Before we get into respiration, just a quick recap of what we covered in nutrition. We talked about unicellular and multicellular organisms. We talked about what is nutrition, how autotrophs are different from heterotrophs, what is the process of photosynthesis, how it takes place, what are the steps of photosynthesis, very important along with the equation and definition of photosynthesis. Then we talked about the function of stomata, and for heterotrophic we talked about different modes of nutrition, saprophytic, holozoic and parasitic. Thereafter we talked about nutrition unicellular organisms, amoeba and paramecium, and for multicellular organism we had a look on the entire nutrition process in humans, the entire alimentary canal, how and where what food gets digested. The process of digestion starts in the mouth and it gets over in the small intestine. So we have talked about all the enzymes and how the food moves forward and gets digested. Now after that, let's come to the next very important life process, that is called respiration. So respiration mainly means not just exchange of gases but also breakdown of food in the presence of oxygen to give you energy. Exchange of gases would be breathing. So just inhaling and exhaling is not respiration, it is breathing, right? So respiration basically includes exchange of gases. After the gases have been exchanged in the lungs, then breakdown of food in the presence of oxygen to generate energy. This is the crucial part where respiration, what is called respiration. So in every cell, now before respiration can take place, digestion is important. Why? Because the energy is stored in the food. We get energy from food. So unless we have eaten something, unless food has gone into the body, respiration cannot work, because respiration involves breakdown of that food in the presence of oxygen. So we inhale air, we inhale oxygen, we take in food, and then both the things, they meet in every cell of the body where respiration actually takes place. So how does respiration, what is actually respiration? So these are the three pathways shown by breakdown of glucose in the cytoplasm of the cell. For every cell receives the nutrients also and oxygen also through the blood. So now in the cytoplasm of every cell, the glucose, that is C6H12O6. This glucose, a 6-carbon molecule, this is broken down to pyruvate, which is the 3-carbon molecule. So it is C3H6O3. So this breakdown of glucose to pyruvate happens in the cytoplasm. Now in the mitochondria, what happens in the mitochondria? In sufficient presence of oxygen, this pyruvate is broken down and it releases 3 molecules of CO2, because it is a 3 carbon molecule, so it releases 3 molecules of carbon dioxide and water and energy. So this is called aerobic respiration that takes place in the presence of oxygen. So mitochondria releases energy and stores it in the form of ATP. We'll just have a look at that also. But in lack of oxygen, when there is not sufficient oxygen, suppose after gymming or after doing a lot of exercise or after running, sometimes we feel pain in our muscles. Why it happens is because we have used a lot of oxygen in our muscle cells, and because of lack of oxygen, pyruvate gets broken down to lactic acid now. This accumulation of lactic acid in the muscle cells is the cause of muscle cramps. And at times you use a hot fermentation or cold fermentation, you use ice pack, or you even do massage to make you feel better. Because whenever you are doing these hot and cold packages, using these or doing massage, you are increasing the supply of oxygen to the affected muscles. And when these muscles, they get sufficient oxygen, this lactic acid again breaks down to carbon dioxide, water and releasing energy, and you feel better. So the pain gets relieved after applying all these things, because it increases the supply of oxygen to these muscle cells that break down lactic acid, right? So accumulation of lactic acid is decreased and that relieves you of the muscle cramps. So this process, this entire process of breakdown of pyruvate to lactic acid happens in the cytoplasm. It does not happen in the mitochondria. Please remember this. This is breaking down lactic acid, pyruvate is breaking down to lactic acid in the cytoplasm only. Only breaking down of pyruvate into CO2 water and releasing energy is done in the mitochondria, or breaking down of lactic acid also into CO2 water and energy happens in mitochondria, the last leg of this three-way pathways. Right? Now there are certain organisms like yeast that survive in absence of oxygen. Here in these organisms, the pyruvate gets broken down to ethanol plus CO2 plus energy. Pyruvate is a 3-carbon molecule, ethanol has 2 carbons. So one carbon molecule is left, that means one molecule of CO2 is released and energy is released. This is called anaerobic respiration that takes place in the absence of oxygen in yeast. So this takes place in the absence of oxygen. Very important. So this absence of oxygen is anaerobic respiration, and in the presence of oxygen, that is called aerobic respiration. This diagram is very important, the 3 pathways of breaking down of glucose. It is very important to note all the points of this. Again, this process takes place in the cytoplasm. So it is only the last leg that takes place in the mitochondria, otherwise the first 2, they are in the cytoplasm itself. Breaking of glucose to pyruvate, pyruvate to lactic acid or ethanol, both, all this is working in the cytoplasm. Only breaking down of pyruvate to CO2 water and releasing energy takes place in the mitochondria. Right? Now let's come to ATP-ADP cycle, how this energy created by mitochondria is stored. So in every cell, this energy created by mitochondria, it is stored in the form of ATP. What is the full form of ATP? What is this ATP? Have you heard of it? Okay. ATP is adenosine triphosphate. So it has 3 phosphorus atoms attached to it. Triphosphate means 3 phosphorus, right? Now whenever energy is needed by a cell for any kind of active process, maybe something like protein synthesis or conduction of nerve impulses or for muscle contraction, the cells need energy. So from where do they get this energy? Energy is stored in the form of ATP, the energy currency of the cell. Now from this ATP, one of the phosphate ions is broken out. So this bond that is attaching this 3rd phosphate to adenosine molecule, this is broken, this is separated out, and the energy stored in this 3rd bond is released. One molecule of ATP releases 30.5 kilojoules. So this is very important, it is given in your NCERT. Do remember, it is 30.5 kilojoules of energy is released by breakdown of one molecule of ATP, right? Now when this bond is broken out, what is going to happen is this adenosine triphosphate will become adenosine diphosphate. Di word means 2. So now because it has only 2 phosphorus left, it is called adenosine diphosphate, and the phosphorus, inorganic phosphate ion, that remains suspended. So these ADP and P, they remain suspended in the cell now. Now whenever mitochondria will create more energy, what it will do it will catch hold of one ADP and one phosphate ion and put them together and create this bond again. So now again from ADP and phosphorus, ATP gets created. So energy from food, energy released during respiration, energy released by the mitochondria, that helps in synthesis of ATP back, right? So ATP releases energy that is used by cellular activities and gets converted to ADP and phosphorus. Mitochondria synthesizes the energy by breaking down food, puts them together again, and then again stores the energy in the form of ATP. So this is the ATP-ADP cycle, which is very, very important. Don't skip this. The amount of energy released by breakdown of one molecule, again I am repeating, 30.5 kilojoules, very important. Now let's come to aquatic plants. Aquatic plants have a higher rate of breathing as compared to terrestrial plants. Why? Because we all have atmosphere, we all have air around us, and that has lots of oxygen, good amount of oxygen that is needed for us. But for aquatic plants, they use the oxygen that is available in the dissolved form, dissolved oxygen in water. So the amount of oxygen available to aquatic plants is not too much. So it is very less as compared to the amount of oxygen that is available in the air around us. So that's why these aquatic plants, they have a higher rate of breathing. So again a reasoning question, please remember why aquatic plants have higher rate of breathing. Next, the fish, they take in, again the reason for this, the fish, they take in water through their mouth and forces past the gills, where dissolved oxygen is taken up by the blood. Now, the question might be something like, in an aquarium, have you seen a fish, it gulps in water very frequently. So, it is opening and closing the mouth very often. Why the fish does that? Because it has to take in lots of water, gulp in lots of water so that it can get sufficient oxygen for it to survive, right? Now, respiration in humans. Let's have a look at the respiratory system in humans, because it is again a complex system where breathing is taking place, exchange of gases is taking place, and cellular respiration is taking place. So, breathing, how it is different from respiration, just let's have a look at how breathing is different from respiration first. So, breathing is a physical process that involves intake of air and exhaling of air. Inhalation and exhalation, this physical process is breathing. Whereas respiration is a biochemical process where energy is released, right? Now, energy is taken in during breathing and it takes place outside the cells. So, it is a system where air is getting in and then moving out also. Whereas in respiration, this takes place at cellular level, it takes place inside the cell, and energy is mainly released in respiration. Now, let's look at the respiratory system of humans, how it works. The human respiratory system consists of nose, nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, trachea, and then the trachea, also known as windpipe. Then we have the two bronchi, and then bronchioles, and then in the end we have alveolar sacs. So, alveolar sacs are at the end of this, right? Now, what happens when we inhale? What happens when we inhale? When we breathe in air, the ribs expand outwards and the diaphragm, it moves upwards. When we inhale, what happens is the ribs, they expand outwards. What is diaphragm? Let's first talk about what is diaphragm. Diaphragm is a muscular sheet that separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity, right? So, when we inhale, the lungs need sufficient space to expand and take in that inhaled air. So, for this the ribs move outwards and the diaphragm, it is pushed down, it becomes flat. So, the diaphragm becomes flat, ribs move outwards, and the lungs have sufficient space to expand and take in the inhaled air, right? Now, what happens during exhalation? When we are exhaling, the ribs, they move inwards and the diaphragm moves upwards. So, the diaphragm pushes up, ribs move inside, so that compresses the thoracic cavity, reduces the space in the thoracic cavity, and the lungs, they squeeze to throw out air. This is what happens during exhalation. Now, the rib cage and the muscles associated with the rib cage and the diaphragm, they all help in inhalation and exhalation, right? Now, exchange of gases, it takes place at the alveoli level. These are alveoli. So, it is something similar to what we have in the digestion process. We have villi in the small intestine that increase the surface area for absorption of nutrients. Here we have alveoli that increase the surface area for exchange of gases. Both alveoli and villi in the nutrition, what we have already done, both are lined with a dense network of blood vessels that increase the process and makes the process of absorption efficient, right? So, the two advantages of alveoli are that it increases the surface area for exchange of gases and it is lined with a dense network of blood vessels that makes the process more efficient. If you look at the total surface area provided by the alveoli, it is approximately 80 meters square. It's huge if you compare it to your entire body surface area. So, the alveolar surface is very huge. And if only diffusion, like if we do not have the entire respiratory system or exchange of gases, the mechanism, the transport system, it would take 3 years for a molecule of oxygen to be transmitted from lungs to the throat through the process of diffusion, if diffusion was the only process involved. Because we have a very complex organization of the entire organism, we have a very complex body organization, because of which we have different systems, different organs working together to make every process efficient. So, the air enters the nostrils, hair and the mucus in the air, in the nostrils, they filter the dust particles, then it passes through the windpipe, that is the trachea, then it reaches the bronchi, left and right bronchi, plural is bronchi, singular is bronchus. Then it reaches the bronchioles. Bronchioles are the smaller branches coming out of the bronchi. And then eventually the alveolar sac, where diffusion takes place for exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So eventually diffusion is taking place, but only at the alveolar level, right? Now there are again reasoning questions here. Why the trachea is lined with cartilageous rings? Again another why. Because trachea is a very delicate single celled organ. So when we are exhaling air, the trachea might collapse. So to prevent the trachea from collapsing, it is lined with cartilageous rings so that it does not collapse when we are exhaling, right? Now during one breathing cycle, the lungs, they always contain some kind of residual volume of air in the alveoli. Now why we have this residual volume? Again another reasoning question. Why residual volume is there in the alveoli? To provide sufficient time for exchange of gases to happen with the process of diffusion, because diffusion is a very slow process, it takes time. So that there is sufficient time for oxygen to be absorbed into the bloodstream and for carbon dioxide to be thrown out into the alveoli. So that's why there is always some kind of residual volume of air present in the alveoli. When we exhale, we don't throw out all the air present in our lungs. Alveoli do have some residual volume, so that this process of exchange of gases remains continuous and it keeps on going on, right? Now the respiratory segment, how these carbon dioxide and oxygen are further carried once this exchange has taken place in the alveoli. The blood, there are certain blood cells, hemoglobin, one of the blood cells is hemoglobin. So hemoglobin is a blood cell that has high affinity for oxygen and it carries oxygen and transports it to all parts of the body. Whereas carbon dioxide is transported in the soluble form. Carbon dioxide is water soluble. So as compared to oxygen, it is transported in the dissolved form, soluble form in the blood, whereas hemoglobin is carrying all the oxygen that is needed by all the cells in the body. Now there are two main harmful effects that can damage the respiratory tract by eating tobacco and by smoking. Tobacco, how it harms the respiratory system is, it may lead to heart attacks, stroke or even oral cancer. So oral cancer is for tobacco, whereas smoking may lead to lung cancer. So don't get confused here, lung cancer may be caused by smoking, oral cancer by tobacco. Because tobacco affects not just the lungs, it also affects your heart and liver. So all the three organs are getting impacted by taking in of tobacco. So it leads to heart attack, stroke or oral cancer. Now smoking damages which part of the respiratory system? Very important question. It damages the cilia, that is the hair present in the upper part of the respiratory system. So cilia are mainly responsible for capturing germs, dust particles or any other harmful particles that are trying to enter along with the air. So these cilia, when they get damaged because of smoking, these germs, dust particles and these harmful particles, they enter our respiratory tract and they can even cause lung cancer. Now let's come to respiration in plants. Now in plants there are again two main processes taking place. Photosynthesis is something that happens in the presence of sunlight, but respiration is happening throughout 24 hours. Plants are also going through the process of respiration to create energy for themselves, because they also need energy to grow. So the plants, they exchange gases through stomata and the large intercellular spaces ensure that the cells are in contact with the air. So CO2 and O2, these can be exchanged through diffusion when the stomata is open, right? Now which gas is being released or absorbed depends on the environmental conditions. For example, during the day, what happens during the day? Photosynthesis is also taking place. The end product of photosynthesis is what? It gives out oxygen, right? And respiration gives out carbon dioxide. So what happens is the carbon dioxide given out by the process of respiration, it is used internally by the plant for the process of photosynthesis during the day. So that means the major activity during the day is oxygen release the carbon dioxide is not thrown out because it is needed for photosynthesis, so it goes as input into the process of photosynthesis, right? But at night, because there is no photosynthesis happening, so what will happen to the CO2? So this CO2 elimination is one of the major activities that happens at night. So this CO2 is given out at night. So plants do give out carbon dioxide. Some children make a mistake that plants never give out carbon dioxide. They always give out oxygen. They do give out oxygen during the day, but at night sometimes, at night they also give out carbon dioxide. So you cannot say they don't give out carbon dioxide because they are respiring 24 hours. They are respiring all the time. So they also give out carbon dioxide at night, and that's why, you know, we also say early morning walks are very important, because in the morning the intermediate products of photosynthesis, as soon as the sun comes out, they are converted to carbohydrates and oxygen is released. So the amount of oxygen released by the plants is very high early morning. So you should always go for morning walk in the morning, right? So that's it for this video. I hope you like the content and you are able to retain some part of it. I've already highlighted the important parts for respiration. So do press the like button if you like the video. If it was helpful, do share it with your friends also. Subscribe to Boundless Maths and keep sharing, keep learning, keep growing. In the next video, we are going to talk about the next life process, that is transportation. Till then, keep learning, keep growing.